what is the biggest myth about the low-carb diet?
Low-carb diet is not ad libitum fat eating. The biggest myth is really around just counting macros, that our gut microbiome are not counting macros. Our cells in our body are not reading nutrition panels.
What are the main science-backed benefits of low-carb diet?
The science is very strong around chronic disease management, particularly in metabolic syndrome, so where people may have high blood sugar levels. It may be insulin resistance, where they have too much of the fat storage hormone and they're insensitive to it, so they're at risk of prediabetes.
Those meal replacements are always really toxic.
Yeah, but people don't know that because they pick up the packet and they look at the macros, or these look good. Then they look at all the vitamins and minerals. Doesn't mean that our gut bugs and our cells in our body treat it the way the back of the packet says. They will treat it as either whole food or synthetic food, and they will process it very differently.
Kate Safe is a clinical dietitian, exercise physiologist, diabetes educator and entrepreneur. She is the CEO and founder of BeFit Food, Australia's award-winning meal provider designed by doctors and dietitians. Kate is an expert on nutrition with over 20 years in health and fitness, who is passionate about improving Australia's relationship with food and advocating for healthier lifestyles. You did a clinical trial testing on your food. What were you testing?
So in the supplement synthetic-based diet, the leptin levels were very unstable, meaning that people would get insatiable appetites and probably regain the weight that they lost because they can't control their appetite.
Welcome to Chief Life, the podcast that cuts the crap with science-backed insights on health, nutrition and performance. Get expert advice, actionable tips and everything you need to take control of your health and live your best life. Let's get started. Hi Kate, and welcome to the Chief Life podcast.
Thank you for having me, Veronica.
Thanks so much for coming. I actually want to tell you something before we get started. I'm not sure if you know this, but you started your company, BeFit Food, the same year we launched Chief Nutrition, 2015.
Oh, wow.
What a year,
Yeah.
I know. Since then you appeared on the Shark Tank. You also received the Victorian Telstra Business Awards, which is incredible. Huge congratulations. What a journey. It's great. So massive business success on your behalf, but we are not here today to discuss your business as such. I invited you to have a chat about low-carb diet and the science behind it. And also, I would like to talk about the world's first clinical trial with BeFit Food. That's exciting. Yeah, so exciting. Okay, so let's start from the basics because I think people need to first clarify the basic things before we progress to the more complicated stuff. What actually is low-carb diet? I know that lots of people are still confused between low-carb and keto.
Yeah, so I think the best way to think about it is that depending on what guidelines you're following, if you're looking at somewhere between, the Australian guidelines will say under 130 grams of carbohydrate is low carb. That's not low carb, that is just low carb compared to the standard Australian or American diet, which is sort of upwards of 200 grams of carbohydrates a day. Realistically, I would say it's somewhere between 20 to 70 grams of carbs, so certainly under 100 grams of carbs. So we partnered with the CSIRO low carb diet for 4 years, making their meals, and their definition of low carb is 50 grams of carbs per day in the first maybe 6 to 12 weeks of a program, and then long-term maintenance just sticking to under 70 grams of carbs per day. Whereas keto is much less. We're really talking less than 20 grams of carbs per day. And keto traditionally was really used for people that were non-responders to epileptic medication. It was used before there was insulin for people with type 1 diabetes. So it has specific uses for specific medical conditions. However, that has been extrapolated to different populations using it for other reasons now and taking endogenous ketones. But it really depends on people's goals and their health conditions as to what they choose. I'm definitely pro low carb, not keto.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying it, because I actually know that most people that I know are on low carb diet, but they think they are on keto because they're talking about, oh, you have to be under 50 grams of carbs, but 50 grams of carbs is low carb and not keto. So that's why I wanted to clarify it from the start so we know what exactly we're talking about. So now tell us, why is low carb diet healthier than high carb diet?
What I would say is, in this day and age where people are consuming 200 to 300 grams of carbohydrates, the majority of those carbohydrates are not coming from fruit and vegetables, dairy sources. They are coming from ultra processed foods and highly processed foods or fast food. So when we're talking about a high carb diet, if that was literally based on eating just vegetable based carbohydrate in their whole food form and fruit, then maybe that wouldn't be so much of an issue because all of the carbohydrates are bound to fibre and they're in a whole food form. But in this day and age, that is not the case. It's more often a high carb diet is just excess amounts of ultra processed foods or refined carbohydrates in the forms of rice, pasta, breads, pastries, snack foods, biscuits. I think really what fills probably more than 50% of our supermarket would be predominantly high carb foods. So why is low carb better? Well, low carb to me isn't really a diet as such. It's just not introducing the foods that we all know we shouldn't be eating into our diet, or not believing the marketing that we're seeing. And I think when you go to the supermarket now, there is a full aisle of chips and biscuits. There's a full aisle of soft drinks. There is a full aisle or thereabouts of frozen ice creams, pastries, desserts. So a lot of the supermarket is man-made food that is not really food. It's all made from ingredients that you probably wouldn't even have half of these things in your pantry at home, or couldn't even access if you wanted to buy them.
You wouldn't even know what they are.
That's right. So it's these man-made foods that is giving carbohydrates a really bad name.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that supermarkets are really disease markets because all those foods are one of the main causes of all the chronic disease we have in this day and age.
Absolutely. Don't get me caught up in the supermarket conversation. I'm very angry at the supermarkets because I think what I've known, we were in 750 supermarkets across Australia for 3 years, 350 over one of those years. And every time we sat to have a range review, I would hear people from the outside, friends and family, going, it's a shame that, this particular supermarket doesn't sell this particular product anymore. They mustn't have been going well. But then on the inside, when you're the brand in the supermarket and you're faced with tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars of minimum marketing spend, you are forced to give away 40 to 50% of your margin. You are forced to pay for every single promotion and to have your product on promotion at least once a month. And it's a race to the bottom in terms of value. And I asked, what is value in the supermarket? And bigger is better. So it doesn't matter what is in that box of food, bigger is better. Which is really sad that we have got people without nutrition degrees choosing the food for our entire nation. If 90% of Australians are shopping at a supermarket, who filled the supermarket with food? It is a buyer. It is not someone who has a nutrition or medical qualification to choose what 90% of Australians should be eating. So there's my little soapbox, but it really infuriates me.
That is such a good point, and it is really infuriating because the amount of crap that it's in supermarkets, it's actually scary, and I feel sorry for people. They don't have a knowledge of nutrition because they really don't know how to navigate through this.
And I'm really at a loss as to why the government isn't involved in putting regulation behind what the supermarkets can range, what percentage of product can be ranged, why there is no warning on aisles for children to be shopping in certain aisles that will definitely give them chronic disease. Yet, heaven forbid you produce a product that actually has some health benefit and you put a claim on that, because then you will definitely get fined. But we're okay to have soft drink aisles, chip aisles, biscuit aisles, ice cream aisles, and cereal aisles full of sugar, yet there's no health warning saying this will destroy your health and the health of your children.
Yeah, I know, but that's the, big food companies make a lot of money, and yeah, I think it's very
It's
hard.
time we probably stand up to them though, isn't it?
Well, we're
really
trying with
is.
Chief as well. We're trying. It is a tough fight, but maybe
Yes.
we'll win. I think people are more attuned to it now, and this is the one good thing about social media. I think when the MAHA movement started in America and they started pointing out all the detrimental effects of food additives and food colorings and how bad is it to always eat ultra processed foods, I think people are more attuned to it, and they looking at the food labels a little bit more, and they want to be educated a little bit more. I can see that, Chief, we get lots of questions, and people are really started to be interested in what they put in their mouth.
It's interesting you say that people want to be educated more, but where are they getting their education from too? And that's quite scary, because a lot of what is seen is put out there by the people who have the money to put the messaging out there.
Yeah.
And we've encountered that recently, trying to get publicity on a study that has been done. Our food was a part of the study, but it was not our study. The study was done by Deakin University, and I know we'll go into it later, but when I've approached certain media to publish this world first study, they are not interested in publishing it because they have a sponsor who pays for their show, and it would not look good to their sponsors. So once that happened twice to me recently, I just went, I won't believe anything that I see or hear anymore, because it got paid to be there. If real news can't be shared for free, then don't believe anything that you hear or see.
I know, it's crazy. And once again, it's very bad for the people that actually don't have the knowledge, because they can't decide what is true and what is not. It's really difficult. Unless you start reading research studies or find a good education source.
And that's interesting too, because I think in social media, when there are people that are trying to do the best job they can navigating the supermarkets, and they're choosing from the best range of products and they're putting it on their socials, they've got hundreds of thousands of followers, and this is the best one they can find, it doesn't mean that product's any good. That is just the best of the range that paid the most money to have that position on the shelf.
Yeah, I know. Well, okay, let's go back to the low-carb diet. It was great to point this out, though, because people should know, and it makes people think. So that was great. But back to the low-carb diet. What are the main science-backed benefits of low-carb diet?
I think the very first one is if we're talking more generic low carb, so just being not having ultra processed foods, because that's really my interpretation of a low carb diet, is just sticking to whole natural foods, less of the starchy, more of the non-starchy, vegetables, fruits, proteins, healthy fats, those sorts of things. The science is very strong around chronic disease management, particularly in metabolic syndrome, so where people may have high blood sugar levels. It may be insulin resistance, where they have too much of the fat storage hormone and they're insensitive to it, so they're at risk of prediabetes, diabetes. It could be high blood pressure, it could be high cholesterol. We now have an abundance of fatty liver disease, and there is no treatment for fatty liver disease other than lifestyle intervention, and the only way to reverse fatty liver disease is through calorie and carbohydrate restriction. So if you have calorie restriction with carbohydrate restriction, you will burn fat off your liver and reverse fatty liver, and this is shown in many studies, so that's some of the benefits. And I think with a low carb diet, it probably is a good way to actually eradicate some of the ultra processed foods out of the diet as well, because most of those foods we talked about in the supermarket aisles are carbohydrate based. All the chips, lollies, chocolates, biscuits, the ice creams, the whatever it might be, all of those soft drink, most of the supermarket is going to be these high carb foods. And not meaning to demonise a blueberry or salads and vegetables, because actually they are not fat and they are not protein, which leaves them in the carbohydrate basket. But people don't understand that there is density between different carbohydrates, and that plant-based foods are traditionally carbohydrate unless they are avocado, which does have fat, but the majority of plant-based foods are carbohydrate, not refined grain carbohydrate, but other regular plant-based vegetables, even legumes. There's a lot of benefits for having legumes in your diet every day, but it doesn't mean that you're having bucket loads of them, but including some within a low carbohydrate diet.
A little bit, and it comes back to having a little bit of everything. I think that people often, in the Western society, because food is so accessible, I think one of the main problems is also overeating, even on a healthy food. Like if you start eating bowls of beans and chickpeas, surely that can cause a problem as well.
Oh, well, apart from lots of wind and digestive issues, you'd probably end up stopping before you overate them because of the distress it would cause your gastrointestinal system. But you're right, we have a calorie surplus, we have so much access to food, and our access to food is no longer just during daylight hours, it's 24/7, and you can get it delivered if you can't access the stores too. So I think it's this overabundance of food, and perhaps even with social media technology, the boredom that people experience whilst they're doom scrolling or they're watching Netflix leads to boredom eating that wouldn't have been something in the past. If you were actually working hard during the day and then coming home to have your evening meal and you had to be up at dawn, you're probably going to bed a little bit earlier and you're not sitting thinking, what should I eat in front of the television?
100%, it's a good point. You also wouldn't be sitting in the office snacking endlessly because you're trying to procrastinate or because you're anxious or something like that. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so you said that you can actually reverse non-alcoholic fatty liver disease with a low-carb diet. You can also reverse the type 2 diabetes, is that right?
Yeah, so with fatty liver disease, low-carb diets will help, but calorie restriction is the first thing, because what you're trying to encourage the body to do is burn body fat as an energy source. So where keto and low carb are quite different. So keto is traditionally about, like we talked about, eating a very high percentage fat diet. So it could be up to 90% fat. Now, if that's ad libitum, so it's not calorie restricted, if you are overeating fat, then there's less chance you're going to burn fat off your own body if you're overeating fat. Like fat will eventually be stored as fat just because you're not eating carbohydrates. So an overabundance of fat is not recommended. In a low-carb diet, however, though, if you've got some degree of caloric restriction, then you will be able to reverse fatty liver. And the gold standard for reversing fatty liver is a very low-calorie diet or a very low-energy diet or a VLED. And what that does is forces the body into mild nutritional ketosis, which is somewhere around 0.5 in terms of ketones. If people are doing finger prick testing, you probably wouldn't even see 0.5 on a ketone strip if you're urine testing. So we're not talking about huge amounts of ketones, but enough that that calorie deficit would force the body to burn body fat as a fuel. And if anyone's sitting there Googling VLEDs or VLCDs, very low energy diets, very low calorie diets, don't go for the first thing that you see, which will definitely be an ultra-processed synthetic meal replacement shake or bar, because we now have the evidence to show there are other ways of doing that with whole foods that are far better than meal replacements that are supplement-based only without whole foods.
Those meal replacements are always really toxic. They're just concoction of synthetic ingredients, right?
Yeah, but people don't know that because they pick up the packet and they look at the macros. Oh, these look good. Then they look at all the vitamins and minerals. Well, this looks nutritionally complete, but they don't realise that what is actually in there is not the real food vitamins and minerals. It is a chemical copy of the structure of that. And we used to think that if you read a nutritional panel and you saw these things, that the human body would treat it like that as well. But what we know is that just because the outside packet in our forebrain tells us, oh, this is what's in it, doesn't mean that our gut bugs and our cells in our body treat it the way the back of the packet says. They didn't get the instructions on the back of the packet. You didn't eat the packet, they didn't see the packet. They will treat it as either whole food or synthetic food, and they will process it very differently.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so what are some of other lesser known benefits of low carb diet? Like, is there any benefit to brain health or any other disorders that people might suffer from?
As long as the low carb diet is in some sort of energy control, so it's not overeating as such, then there is that production of ketones or mild nutritional ketosis, and the brain does benefit from that cleaner energy source. But the body's not also meant to be in ketosis 24/7. So when we are born, the first 2 years of our life, if we're exclusively breastfed, we grow astronomically and we are in ketosis most of the time because of the mother's breast milk. And the breast milk is also quite undigestible, so it's prebiotic, so it helps our gut health. But we go in and out of this ketosis because of the carbohydrate in the breast milk with the balance of fats and proteins, and then between meals as we're growing so quickly. So the same thing with adults is you do not need to be in ketosis or even mild ketosis your entire life. You want to have periods where you try different things. It will help you to shed body fat, to teach your body to burn body fat, but you'll also build metabolic flexibility. And metabolic flexibility is the ability to go between burning carbohydrate in food and burning body fat. And a lot of people don't have that flexibility, and that flexibility diminishes with insulin resistance, which is often caused by first over calorie consumption, but certainly over carbohydrate consumption most of the time because it's beyond our energy needs, and most of us are more sedentary. Unlike you, Veronica, I heard you do how many thousand steps a day?
I do 20,000 steps a day at least.
I thought so. It's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, 10,000 for me, I'm happy, but I like to do something else. You know, that's just my walking steps, but 20,000, you are breaking records. That's amazing.
You know, I do it because I can't run at the moment. I've been injured, and so I just try to keep moving, because when you're a long distance runner and you stop running, you lose the adaptations in your tendons to the impact. And like, I actually try to at least maintain it a little bit by walking. And also, if I sit all day in the office, I just want to stand up like in the morning, evening, lunch break, and just walk to just keep moving, because the sitting all day, every day, I think it's the worst in combination.
I don't have a chair at work. I use a standing desk actually, for that reason, that I know that if the chair was there, when you're at work and you're flat out busy, you don't move. So take away the chair and you're forced to stand.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. So what is the mechanism behind the low-carb diet being so beneficial for all these conditions, such as diabetes and the fatty liver disease?
So by restricting carbohydrate, as long as we're talking about, where I don't like this to be taken out of context is, if people were having their 50, 100 grams of carbs a day thinking they're eating low carb, but those carbohydrates are coming from an ultra processed food, maybe they're just eating, I don't know, Cheerios or something ridiculous like that, you're probably not going to have those same benefits. So it needs to be coming from a whole food source first, and then by restricting that carbohydrate and letting the body get into this state of mild nutritional ketosis, then our body's got this ability to go between burning fat and burning carbohydrate. Some of those other benefits you'll certainly see in blood markers and pathology. So you'll see perhaps reduced blood glucose levels, reduced insulin levels. We talked about fatty liver, but a lot of people also get fat around their pancreas that can cause the high blood sugar levels and high insulin levels. You'll also see potential reductions in cholesterol, particularly triglycerides. So triglycerides is a buildup of fat in the blood. And when it comes to HDL and LDL cholesterol, if we've got the rest of our diet pretty good, you should see a reduction in maybe total cholesterol, but definitely that LDL cholesterol, if you can get your ratios right of your healthy fats in there as well, and that overall balance. And depending on how people are looking after the rest of their health, even CRP, which is a non-specific marker of chronic inflammation, can improve. Now, not taking that out of context, once again, it's not just the carbohydrates, it's just when we have a lower carbohydrate diet, there's less room for all these ultra-processed foods and sugary snacks and these things that are filling our supermarkets, service stations, fast food. And I think my real bugbear these days is when you go to get a coffee and you're standing there and you're looking, I'm really starving, I want something to eat. Generally, there are very few cafeterias that will have a single food that is more protein than it is carbohydrate. So going back almost probably be 7 or 8 years ago, I trademarked carb to protein ratio. The reason I did this is I believe that is part of the secret of maintaining a healthy body weight, because if your carbohydrate and your protein are in a 1-to-1 or less ratio, then you regulate your appetite better. You're getting protein with your carbohydrate, so you're going to reduce glycemic index in that meal as well. And you can't eat as much protein as you can carbohydrates. So all of a sudden, it probably helps you to restrict your portions as well, because if you need to match your pasta bowl that has 100 grams of carbs in it because you're having a couple of cups of pasta in it, and then you're trying to get that same amount of protein, you're going to end up with this monstrous amount of food that's you're probably not going to be able to finish it before you get through it. So I believe carb to protein ratio is a really good way for people to start to look at their total carbohydrate intake without cutting out whole foods. But a good example of this, if we were looking at yogurts, for example, you could pick up a yogurt that's a traditional fruit-flavoured yogurt that might have been on the market 20 or 30 years, and you'll find its carbohydrates probably somewhere between 20 to 30 grams and its protein somewhere between 5 to 10 grams. So that is the reverse of a 1-to-1 carb to protein ratio. That is a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 or even a 4-to-1 or 5-to-1 carb to protein ratio. Whereas if you pick up a more natural yogurt, like a Greek yogurt or even some of the protein fortified yogurts, they might have a more similar 1-to-1 ratio. So for example, a Greek yogurt may have 5 grams of carbs, up to 10 grams of carbs, to somewhere between 5 to 20 grams of protein. So all of a sudden you've got 1-to-1 or 0.5 to 1, which is where we sort of want to be heading.
That's a really great tool, and it also helps people to eat more protein, because that's what many people struggle with, right?
Yeah, they struggle with satiety, they struggle with how much protein to have, and if you tie it to your carbohydrates, then it's going to be a little bit easier to manage your protein and carbs, because that means at the end of the day, if you had 100 grams of carbs, you also had 100 grams of protein.
Yeah, that's great. And so which one is better for weight loss, low carb or low fat?
Well, if you look at the science and the studies out there, you will find a lot of science about low fat diets working, but that science is often, you need to look at who paid for that science, when that science was done, how that was done. If you look at low carb diets, you'll see science there showing that works as well. But I think the only thing that really works is more of a whole food approach and some level of carbohydrate restriction and tying it to your protein as well. So with weight management, you'll get more satiety with more protein. So we know that it's easy to sit down to a bowl of pasta. It's hard to sit down to the same size bowl of meat. That might be, your bowl of pasta, a generous sort of serving that you might have after sport. If you filled that same size bowl with burgers or something like it, you're going to have a pretty big tummy ache. And if you got through the equivalent of maybe 5 or 6 burgers being just the rissole part compared to that bowl of pasta. So you're going to feel a lot fuller having less carbohydrate, and you're probably going to be able to avoid a lot of those ultra-processed foods as well.
And you probably have less cravings as well, because lower blood sugar fluctuations, right? So I think from what I've read, and you might say I'm wrong, the low-carb and low-fat diet had about the same results if people adhere to it. but it was much easier to adhere to low-carb diet because the no sugar cravings and higher satiety.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more there. And yes, weight loss could be similar, but depending on the studies that you look at as well, body fat management can be different. Now, there is science on both sides, so I have seen it favouring carbs, but also in saying that, is that short-term science? Because we all know that carbs are pretty insatiable. Once you put your hands into, I don't know, the thing of popcorn or the thing of chips or biscuits or there is a pretty endless amount of those things. They're not very satisfying. Whereas if you did the same with cheese and meat and other protein foods, tuna and fish, and you get to the point where you're really done with it and 100%. You just couldn't keep going.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And also, like, I'm always on low-carb diet for like 2 decades, but I'm not always 100% low-carb. Sometimes I have something sweet occasionally, and as soon as I have something sweet, I want more. And it's hard to stop, even though I'm mostly on the low-carb diet all the time. But as soon as I have something sweet, I'm like, oh, what else could I have? Like, it's very...
Yes.
Yeah, I can
it's
really
addictive.
Feel it. Yeah, it's great.
So the carbohydrates do give you that serotonin, dopamine, pleasure kind of hit. And that hit is intentional so that you do go back for more. Because as hunter-gatherers, when we were first put here, the more of that you could get, the less chance you had of starving. You could stock up for the winter and the fasting period, but we no longer have fasting periods that are enforced unless you enforce them on yourself. So we've got this feast without a famine, and the issue with that is, when are you going to burn off those carbohydrates? And there's only so much the body can store. So we store maybe a few 100 grams in our liver, we store maybe 1 kilo in our muscles at most, but once those amounts are full in our body, then we start converting it into fat in the body, and we start putting it into these triglycerides and then shoving it in parts of the body that are really dangerous, whether that's shoving it into our muscles, shoving it into our internal organs or around our internal organs, and all of a sudden it's like I heard an analogy the other day of like a suitcase that you just keep shoving things in and sitting on it and trying to close, but you keep putting more and more in.
Yeah.
Like, there's a point where there's not going to be a good outcome. Like, you're going to bust a zip, and that could be a heart valve for someone.
Yeah, that's actually a really good, like a picture of, that everyone can envision. And I also think, the problem is that lots of people read advice or like nutritional advice for athletes, and they implement those tactics, but they sit in the office all day while eating like a marathon runner, and they don't think that they can actually burn all the carbohydrates and all the energy.
Yeah, and thank you to marketing and social media, where people are just popping these goos and gels and drinks 24/7, all these carbohydrates. And I know I have an 11 and 13-year-old daughter, and they are the first to see whether it's some new energy drink or a bar or whatever it is, and to ask about it at home. And the good thing is they ask before they try these things, and they want to understand it, whereas some kids may not have parents that really know what is good for their kids, and the kids may go ahead and sort of try whatever the latest fad is, and we're setting our kids up for failure.
Yeah, it is really sad. Needs to be more education around it. But talking about the low-carb diet, obviously great benefits, and it's beneficial for weight loss, for a lot of different illnesses and disorders, but are there any groups of people that should not be on low-carb diet?
If we're talking about 50 grams of carbohydrate, probably not.
Everyone.
And I mean, the CSIRO low carb diet is 50 to 70 grams of carbohydrate, and that has been specifically written to help people that are suffering from insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, diabetes. So the people that need the help most, that is who it is best for. Now, in terms of people that are athletes and fueling for sport, it depends on how they perform best, and they do it around their training. Now, I know you're someone who's done ultra marathons, and hence your creation of Chief as well, to have protein for training. And you can speak from your own experience. how do you train, what do you eat, and particularly when you were doing your marathons or ultra marathons.
I know, like, I feel definitely better not having the gels. My last ultra marathon I did, I was on a full carnivore diet. And it was actually interesting because I didn't have any crashes or energy fluctuations during. Afterwards, I wasn't tired. Like normally I'm tired after ultra. I get a bit cold and irritable. I didn't have any of that. And I wasn't sore afterwards, which was incredible because the race ended with 1,000 steps in the Blue Mountains. And I was expecting to be so sore and I wasn't. And I think that when I tried in the past, I was always on low-carb diet, but I tried to have the carbohydrates around the races. And I think because the fiber and all of that was so filling, I didn't eat enough protein as a result. And that's why I was more sore and had more muscle damage. So I definitely feel better on the low-carb diet. However, I'm really dying to ask you something. So last Friday, I was at the Monash University doing a course about exercise-induced gastrointestinal issues, and we were specifically talking about ultramarathon runners. And the researcher that's his topic of research was saying that even after one ultramarathon, you can induce yourself inflammatory bowel disease because of the gut damage that prolonged running causes, especially if you run through the night and if it's like 24 hours and those really long races. And I asked if a low-carb diet would be good for this, and he said no.
It's one lot of research, I guess, and I have certainly seen patients over the years, and I can think of one who I saw with an endocrinologist as well, and she was having extreme gastrointestinal distress, and she was a marathon runner. So it's quite a common thing, but what we're trying to do is generalize without, as a dietitian, I would always, if someone's got these sorts of issues, be looking on a very individualized level. So I'd be looking at not just regular pathology that the doctor's going to do. I'd be getting gut microbiome tests because there's possibly, like, to end up with inflammatory bowel conditions, you've got a dysbiosis there. You've got the wrong bacteria there. Now, it's interesting, maybe his comment was related to a restrictive diet, because the more if you restrict entire food groups and don't eat any plant-based carbohydrate, then you're going to restrict your gut microbiome. You're going to grow more ketophilic bacteria in the gut, which may be more inflammatory. So there is benefits to having some carbohydrate, but I'm sure that's what, you weren't saying don't ever eat a plant-based food.
Oh, no, again, never, no. But I still eat vegetables. It's just I don't eat like rice, pasta, bread. Like I never eat those things. I'm always on fairly low-carb diet. I don't know if it's always under 50. It's probably more. But it's fairly low-carb.
Do you eat some legumes sometimes? No, they give you distress. Fair enough. Not everyone can tolerate them. There's all sorts of things in legumes that can upset people's guts. But in terms of getting the plant-based foods, they're really important. There's 150,000 different compounds in plant-based foods that are really important for getting diversity in the gut microbiome. And there's no such thing as a perfect gut microbiome. And every individual has an individual fingerprint. They'll have an individual gut microbiome. So if someone tells you there's a perfect microbiome, there isn't. So don't go looking and don't aim for that. But what they do know in studies is people that have greater diversity tend to have greater health as well. And they do know there are particular bacteria that are anti-inflammatory. So there is this conversation for having too little plant-based fibrous foods, I guess, because you may then narrow the diversity of the gut microbiome, and then that could end up in these inflammatory bowel conditions. But I think that's been oversimplified.
Yeah, it is not easy, hey? And I think that you're right. If you restrict yourself too much, you end up being really sensitive to everything. Like I know some people in the carnivore community that literally cannot have anything other than meat after eating just meat for 3 years because their body just can't process anything because of lack of the bacteria.
That is exactly what happens, and I say the same to people that go on low FODMAP diets. You go on an elimination diet for 6 weeks, then you need to try and reintroduce some of those foods to a tolerance level. The idea is never to cut them out for life, because if you're cutting out complete food groups and lots of foods, and you're really going to restrict that gut microbiome diversity. And we know there is a direct link between diversity, good health, and even good mental health. So it's not just physical health, but mental health here. And Professor Felice Jacka did the SMILES trial in 2017. So it's the first study in the world that looked at either treating major depression and anxiety with counselling or with food. So the people that went in the counselling arm, they got 7% remission in major depression, and the people that treated it with food, which was a more Mediterranean style diet, got a 32% remission in their major depression. So that's just to say that food will help with the counselling. Not to say you don't have the counselling, but if you put those two together, you're going to get much stronger benefits than just doing the counselling without changing the diet. And the Mediterranean diet that they're talking about in these studies isn't pizza and pasta. It's not our westernised version. Yeah, and wine. They're the things people take away. I should drink more red wine. No, actually, they're talking about having more nuts and olive oil and more vegetables and plant-based foods, and fish and meat are all in there as well. But eating from the land is really what they were indicating.
It is. And these fats, actually, I forgot to say that when we were talking about the diet, whether low-fat or low-carb is better for weight loss, I actually dislike the low-fat diet because you need fat for your hormones, your cells, your brain function, and I just think that even for aging, like if I start eating low-carb, low-fat diet at the age of 45, I'm probably going to look like I'm 60 in the space of 1 year. Because of the lack of fats for my skin.
And if you have no fats either, your gallbladder's not pushing out bile, and you're more likely to get gallbladder disease if you're super restrictive. So, trying to have balance in there, but balance also, it's not the throwaway, which I hear a lot of health professionals talking about, just eat the rainbow and have balance. And that sounds very general and non-prescriptive. Yeah. In my words, it is very much cut out nearly all ultra-processed foods, find a more natural version of them, and eat really good variety. Don't say no to anything other than really highly processed man-made foods.
Yeah, that's a good advice. I love it. So I think after this whole part of conversation, a lot of people would want to try the low-carb diet to feel better. Are there any precautions people should take, or are there any not so pleasant effects from transitioning to the low-carb diet? And if they are, what would be your tip to prevent them or ease them?
Step one for people that are listening, that are having a regular kind of Western diet that might be having 200 to 300 grams of carbs per day if they're not counting, going to 100 grams of carbs per day is a really good starting point. You shouldn't feel any side effects other than you're going to have to cut out some of your regular foods, and that might hurt your heart, but it won't hurt your body. So once you've got to 100 grams of carbohydrates per day, if you can get down to that 50 to 70, that's where the research from the CSIRO is showing that there are lots of metabolic benefits there, and that is something you can stay on long term. It's not restrictive. It does allow you to have a good variety of food from all different food groups. So the only other restrictions would be, obviously, when you're cutting out carbohydrates, you're often cutting out calories with those foods. So being conscious, if you are cutting out lots of calories, what is your goal? Is your goal body fat reduction or weight reduction? And if that is not the case, then you're probably going to have to add in calories, whether that's from healthy fats or protein foods. So actually replacing calories if you want to stay the same weight, or you will lose weight. Undeniably, you will lose weight. Yeah. So caution there that if you are losing weight and you take any sort of medication, you are going to see a drop in your need for a lot of these medications, whether that's blood pressure, cholesterol, particularly diabetes medications. All of these markers will start to drop, and then you may feel dizzy and be over-medicated. So that's when you chat to your doctor, say, I'm going to cut out some carbohydrate. I'm mostly cutting out ultra-processed foods, but it may cut me back to under 100 grams of carbs per day, and then my calories might come down by 500 calories a day, and then you're probably going to lose half a kilo a week based on 500 calories less. And if you're exercising as well, maybe you'll lose more than that. So being very mindful if you're taking medications that your dosage requirements might come down in a good way, but you will need support because you'll start to feel dizzy and you'll wonder why.
Yeah, that is important. But talking about medications, actually, what do you think about people taking weight loss medication so much these days when they don't have diabetes, they don't have metabolic syndrome, and they take medications like Ozempic and Mounjaro? Do you think it's a smart idea?
I had someone sit with me for an hour last week trying to convince me to convince their husband to let them go on weight loss medications because of all of the side effects that they were feeling from perimenopause, menopause, and I get it. When people think they have tried absolutely everything, should they start using the weight loss drugs? And there wasn't an argument on the planet that this particular person could get around me, because anything that once you start one of those weight loss drugs, the goal is to be on it for the rest of your life. And how this was presented to me was, if you are put on a blood pressure medication, you are never coming off it. So why would it be any different to go on a weight loss medication and think that you're going to come off it? So we know that when you come off these medications, that you will regain the weight. So the only way not to regain the weight is to change your lifestyle. So then I challenge this particular person, well, why do you need the medication to change your lifestyle? If you think you're going to change your lifestyle anyway, that you're going to start strength training a minimum of 3 times a week. Now, anyone who's thinking about starting the drug, join the gym first, start strength training, and once you're in a really good rhythm with that, then decide if you still need the drug. But it is not optional to not strength train when you take the drug. The second thing is, it is not optional not to eat because you are not going to feel hungry. So the problem there is, it's going to become very difficult to choose the right foods to eat when you feel sick all the time or when you have no appetite. It is far easier for people to go, I'm just not hungry. You know what? I'm just going to grab a biscuit. One biscuit's not going to hurt me out of the bicky barrel. You are then going to become very malnourished. So if you are thinking about going on the drug, you need a perfect diet that is perfectly balanced with the right amount of protein at every single meal, the right amount of fats, the right amount of dietary fibre. You'll be so constipated, it will exacerbate your sickness because you will be belching and bloated and all the things. So you're going to feel sick anyway on the medication. So that will make it so much worse. So if you're not prepared to have a perfect diet and to exercise more than you are now, and particularly strength train, don't even think about starting the drug.
Yeah, that's a great summary. You know what? From the people I know that are on it, they actually can't be on a perfect diet because, as you said, they don't have appetite and they can't actually stomach eating like a full steak or bowl of vegetables because it's too much. So they have little foods, they're like feeding their stomach, but they're usually full of crap. They're usually chocolates and biscuits.
And look, there's a place for the drugs if it's, you know, a life or death. And for a lot of people,
I'm talking about healthy people, not
yes, right, there we go.
Yeah, not
and
like
healthy
obviously
people.
if someone has got diabetes and they weigh 200 kilos, get it. But I was talking
there's
about
lots of benefits there, but it's a steep learning curve, and there's a lot of lifestyle intervention that needs to happen with it. And I think there's a lot of blame as well that the drugs don't work on me, or the drugs are no good. No. The person who gave you the drugs forgot to tell you you need to change your lifestyle for the rest of your life. It's not the drug that's not working, it's your lifestyle that's not working.
Yeah, I love that. Well, talking about myths and misconceptions, what is the biggest myth or misconception about the low-carb diet that you would like to debunk?
It's not, low-carb diet is not ad libitum fat eating. So a lot of people will think because they're on a low carb diet, all of a sudden with their steak, they're having huge amounts of butters and cheeses and mayonnaises and just loading their plate full of macros. We, as human beings, we need a wide variety of food. We need a wide variety of natural foods that come from the earth that have all different vitamins and minerals. We need some plant-based foods. We need some of these phytochemicals. So it shouldn't be a macro-based diet. It really should be restricting ultra-processed foods, ultra-processed carbs, choosing the carbs that are going to give you enough fibre, enough vitamins, minerals, nutrients naturally, and then adding your proteins and healthy fats to make sure you meet your requirements there. So I think the biggest myth is really around just counting macros, that our gut microbiome are not counting macros. Our cells in our body are not reading nutrition panels. So forget about your macros. Cut out the crap, eat good food.
Love it. You know, when I first started this podcast, we actually wanted to name it Cut the Crap. And then we changed it to Achieve Life, but I love that. Cut out the crap and you'll be fine. Anyway, I really want to ask you about the trial with BeFit Food. Tell us all about it. So you did a clinical trial testing on your food. What were you testing?
Yeah, so it wasn't our clinical trial. It was Deakin University. So in 2019, I met with Professor Felice Jacka and her team. So Felice Jacka is the Honourable Deakin Distinguished. She's got an Order of Australia medal as well. And she did that SMILES trial that looked at food, depression and counselling. And she established Deakin University's Food and Mood Centre, which was all about researching, I guess, how the brain and the gut and our food are all connected. Now, this study was very much around comparing meal replacement bars and shakes in their synthetic form. So those particular bars and shakes have been around decades. And VLCDs, very low calorie diets, or VLEDs, very low energy diets, have been written up in journals for decades as the solution for curing diabetes, reversing fatty liver disease, lots of other medical conditions. However, there has not been a lot of studies, if any, comparing using those sorts of VLEDs with a whole food version. Okay. So this is what this study was. We were making small meals that were nutrient dense, and the reason why BeFit Food did small nutrient dense meals is we know that people that have had, say, bariatric surgery, so maybe they've had a gastric sleeve, gastric bypass or a lap band, they can't eat much. So how do you get as much nutrition in a meal as you can? The same thing with GLP-1s. People that are eating small amounts of food need really nutrient-dense food. Now, people that need more nutrients, like you and I, that are active and we need more nutrients, it's nice to be able to get the bit that's hard to prepare, the 4 to 12 veggies, the flavoursome bit with the fresh herbs and spices. And I mean, protein's not hard, but some people find it inconvenient at work. You're not cooking your steak in the office, you know, whatever. So the other parts are easy to add, the extra calories. So with BeFit Food, they compared our whole food meal replacement with the synthetic meal replacement. What they found is after 3 weeks, the 47 people that were randomised to either diet both lost the same amount of weight. But the difference was the people that did it with real food improved their gut microbiome diversity. There was 45 beneficial species that they actually improved compared to the synthetic meal replacement. They actually maintained more lean body mass. So when they measured their gluteal mass, so the muscles around their butt, the people with whole food actually kept their muscle around the butt more than the people that did it on a supplement, which really surprised me because it just shows how the human body is not reading the macros. Yeah. It's actually looking at the food, and is that real meat, chicken, fish, or is that a synthetic version of a protein? So there was a difference there. And then the last finding was around leptin. So leptin is one of our incretins, our hunger hormones, and leptin is secreted by fat cells to tell us that we're full and give us satiety. Now, both groups lost weight, and when you lose weight, usually your leptin levels would increase. So in the supplement synthetic-based diet, the leptin levels were very unstable, meaning that people would get insatiable appetites and probably regain the weight that they lost because they can't control their appetite. Whereas with the whole food, you stabilise your appetite, which is probably going to mean you're not going to do the catch-up eating and regain the weight you lost during the diet. So it really opened my mind to the world of dieting, because we've always been told if you diet and you lose weight fast, you'll regain it back and more body fat, and that dieting and particularly rapid weight loss means more weight gain. Well, that's when you do it the wrong way and you stimulate overeating. You use synthetic vitamins, minerals and proteins that the body's not maintaining the same amount of muscle mass, and you're not building a healthy body from the inside with the gut microbiome to the outside. So the difference on the surface level was the same, the weight loss was the same, but on the inside of the body, our human cells, our bacterial cells acted very differently, our hormones reacted differently.
Yeah, 100%. Pretty much in a nutshell, if you lose weight and by eating ultra-processed foods and you keep eating them, you'll become skinny fat and really sick and malnourished.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. You couldn't have put it any simpler, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that, because, you know, it might stick from someone like you. That was so good. Thank you so much for the info.
My pleasure. And I was just thinking there's an acronym for that, toffee, thin outside, fat inside.
I love it. I've never heard that. That's so good. I love it. Okay, I've got last two questions that I ask most of my guests. If you could give only one health advice to all our listeners today, what would that be? And question number 2, what's your favorite book?
The first one I've probably raved on about too much, but just eat whole foods. Don't be obsessed with macros, just eat whole foods. Cut out the ultra-processed stuff and you will live a long, happy, healthy, satisfied diet.
Love it.
And one of my favourite books, probably Peter Attia's book, Outlive. And it's just 5 simple, well, not so simple, but very simple tips that we all know about how to live a healthier, longer life. Really about your nutrition and your exercise and the different types of exercise and what to look for in your food and nutrition and sleep and stress and all the key things that we all should be doing that we overlook. So it's a very scientific, long book that is very simple at the end of the day. It's very practical.
I love it. I'll look it up. Well, thank you so much for your time. That was great. And I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me, Veronica.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you for listening. Let us know in the comments below what topics interest you, and don't forget to follow us.